Good morning, everyone. We are now back from recess. Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to waive Rule Number 1.01D10 regarding our attire on the session floor for today for our members and staff of the Legislature in Guam in recognition of Denim Day in support of rape and sexual assault survivors. Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker.
Assiduous Masi, Senator Shelton. There has been a motion on the floor. Any objections? No objection. Motion carries. Okay. Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I begin, I'd just like to thank my colleagues for all their support for my sister yesterday, and my family thanks you so much. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I would like to move that we go back to Bill 7-35 for consideration.
There has been a motion to return to Bill 7-35, which was set aside yesterday. Any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill number 7-35 LS as amended by the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice. And I would like to move it to the third reading final, and I'd like to speak on it.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to introduce Bill 7 as amended by the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Trust. And I thank Senator Therese Chalahi and her team and the Legal Bureau for their help in preparing Bill 7 for this month's session agenda. Madam Speaker, Bill 7 was introduced at the request of individuals familiar with the Application Review Committee, also known as the ARC process. Per Executive Order 96-26, the composition of the ARC includes the Department of Land Management, the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, the Department of Public Works, Guam Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Agriculture, Guam Waterworks Authority, Department of Parks and Recs, and the Guam Power Authority. These agencies review applications for authorization on projects that require variances for zoning conditions, used, and other considerations outside the existing regulations. Bill 7 proposes the following: clarifying that the 30-day review period are business days. B, a member agency requiring additional time shall obtain written approval no later than 10 business days prior to the 30-day deadline. Additional time granted shall not exceed 14 business days. Director of member agency failing to meet timeline required shall pay $1,000 administrative fine as a personal expense. E, the Department of Land Management required to develop policies and procedures for enforcement of the administrative fine through the AAA process. F, Director of Land Management must pay an administrative fee in the event his or her agency fails to initiate development of policies and procedures. And lastly, at the request of the Department of Land Management, the administrative fines shall be deposited into the Land Survey Revolving Fund to support surveying, mapping, and registration of all government-owned real properties. Madam Speaker, as shared during the public hearing on Bill 7, the proposed administrative fine for member agencies of Application Review Committees, the ARC, reflects similar penalties such as violations related to the Guam Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, with the director of the applicable agency and department personally responsible for paying the proposed $1,000 fine. In closing, Madam Speaker, Bill 7 recognizes the important role of the ARC with respect to economic development. However, we also need to recognize and support responsible businesses that provide this economic growth and expand our island's workforce through new and sustainable industries and additional resources supporting public services for our families and island community. Madam Speaker, I also have here an amendment I would like to make to the bill.
Please state your amendment.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I have it here. I'd like to have it passed out to my colleagues. Okay, make sure I get all 15 here. Madam Speaker, what I would like to do to move to delete the language and, well, let me allow just a minute so this will be passed out. Thank you.
Does everyone have a copy of the amendments? Senator Taitigui, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that moment. Madam Speaker, I move to delete the language in Section 1 of Bill 7, which is on page 2, beginning on line 6. Madam Speaker, the sentence I move to delete reads, "A second extension may be granted with written approval from the chairman of the Application Review Committee for a period not to exceed 14 working days." Madam Speaker, I thank the Oversight Committee for their work in strengthening Bill 7 and would like to make sure that through this motion we ensure that land use applications are reviewed and acted upon in a timely manner. Bill 7 makes it clear that members of the ARC will be given 30 working days, not calendar days, to provide their position statement, which, Madam Speaker, equals to 1 month and 1 week. Should a member agency require additional time, an extension of 14 working days may be sought by giving an agency another 3 weeks or nearly two full months. Madam Speaker, if the member agency requires and obtains a second extension of another 14 days, that agency will have had nearly 2.5 months or approximately 75 calendar working days to prepare their position. Now, Madam Speaker, actually this bill in the 34th Guam Legislature was passed by Senator Tom Adder with regards to changing it from 60 days to 30 days. And that bill passed. And right now, current law is now 30 days. There was a reason for that, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I believe a single extension is more than sufficient, and that a member agency requiring additional time beyond 2 full months should be well prepared to submit preliminary findings and recommendations while submitting the ARC its intent to submit some supplemental information as necessary. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Situs Masi, Senator Taitigui. Is there anyone that would like to speak on the amendment? Senator Marsh first, and then Senator Terlahi.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. So, point of information, I want to make it clear that with one of the agencies that's part of this application review is the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, and I am married to the director of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. I do have other information I'd like to share, but I can yield to Senator Therese Terlahi first, if she desires. Did you want to go?
Senator Marsh, you can proceed.
Okay. So I appreciate the author's intent. We all want transparency. We all want things to work as efficiently as possible. We all want to be a prioritized customer of the government. And so I see the intent in the bill. And I do think it's good that the authors are looking for ways to resolve some of these sort of issues. However, I have continued to think through this issue, and I have some real reservations. And so as we are all looking at our agencies and our different entities that are under our oversight, we're finding pretty much across the board, if not completely across the board, that we are having severe manning shortfalls. For example, with our police department, whereas 10 or 20 years ago they had 300 officers, now they've got 200. We're dealing with severe funding shortfalls in a lot of them. And so there are some issues like that that are already putting them at a great disadvantage to be able to meet their very large mandates. They have local mandates, these different agencies. They likely have federal mandates. They have to follow some international types of mandates as well, I'm sure. So they have very large mandates to be tackling as well. So I was also looking through the information, and the Department of Land Management itself was saying that they had some real concerns that the quality of the agency review, if such a heavy penalty is put in place, of course it will create incentive for that to be prioritized, but maybe at the expense of all the other mandates that they're desperately trying to meet with fewer staff and not enough money. And so they were afraid that the quality of the review would be compromised, and really it creates an atmosphere where there's incentive to deny. If there's any question and there's not enough time to really see that through, or if they're having to rush because they're balancing so many things, then the more likely answer to that review is perhaps to deny it rather than to have sat through and tried to work it through a little bit further. And especially, I was already concerned with 30 days, which is cutting it in half from what it's been previously. And again, I understand the intent of that. But then also the amendment to take out one of the extension days. On Guam, probably elsewhere in the world as well, but on Guam, we certainly understand we have so many contingencies that we're dealing with. We have fires during the dry season, we have typhoons during the wet season, and we have typhoons during the dry season as well. Some of them are super typhoons. We have family issues that come up as emergencies. We just have so many things that are possible contingencies to take away from even the possibility of these extensions, I think is really problematic. And then if we look at that issue of 30 days, the Department of Land Management itself had said that 60 days would be more reasonable. And if we look across the board at our different entities, reviews that call for longer periods of time, 60 days is perhaps more the norm. Some even allow for 90 days of review. So I just think with all of these conditions, severe manning staff shortfalls, severe funding shortfalls, the possibility of this adversely affecting the priorities, all kinds of contingencies that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And then where the agencies themselves who are on the ground, they know their possibilities, they know their ability to carry these things out. They are saying and calling for the 60 days. And so I think to then levy an incredibly severe penalty of $1,000, I recognize that for FOIA, it is $1,000, but I think FOIA fits into a different sort of a category. Like, we all have to be transparent, and that's incredibly important. But I would call for, well, first, unfortunately, I have to oppose this bill at this time because with all of those issues at hand, it's, not to sound too harsh, but it's kind of kicking a dog when they're down. We have a new administration in place. We have a new set of directors. From what I've seen, they're very energized. They want to roll up their sleeves. They want to fix these issues. And I think to start off at the very onset of what they're trying to help resolve, that we're already kind of setting up a situation where we're penalizing them and possibly setting them up to kind of fail at what they're trying to resolve. And so with the penalty, I think that it really needs maybe expert review of what would be more reasonable. I stand in opposition, unfortunately, to the bill, so I wouldn't like to see any penalty at all at this point. But I think if a penalty is to be put into place, it really needs some expert review to understand what is equitable in that situation. What I would recommend is to have an informational hearing or a roundtable. I think a roundtable is really important at this point. I think people have been in place, the directors have been in place long enough that they could really come with some quality information and find out what those stopgaps are. There are potentially stopgaps, but to find out what they are, because we need to get to the root of the problem. I think just slapping a penalty onto it instead of actually finding out what their issues are, trying to help them resolve those issues and smooth it out so that our community is better served by all of these agencies, and we're creating a smoother flowing path to addressing their land use applications. I think we really need to go the route of trying to resolve it, trying to give these directors a chance to make the difference that they have been talking about making, and give them a chance to resolve the issues that they are facing. I think we need to take that kind of approach first. Increasing penalties does not always resolve an issue. In other cases, today we're dressed up in denim to bring awareness to things like needing to stop and stand against sexual assault and those sorts of issues. Giving somebody who's committed a crime of sexual assault a higher penalty is not necessarily, as far as the studies I've read over the years, is not going to necessarily stop the assault from happening. You need to get to the root of the issue. You need to understand if there's a mental illness, if there's some sort of behavioral issue that's at the root of everything, and address it there. So, if anything, I would promote the 60 days. I would promote really looking at that penalty. I would promote having a roundtable to resolve the issues as the answer to all of this. And again, unfortunately, at this point in time, I have to oppose the bill. Sujusmasi.
Thank you, Senator Marsh. That was a lengthy point of information. So I'm thinking that that was your point of information, and then perhaps you can speak on the bill itself. Okay, thank you. Senator Terlahi, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, I have to object to this amendment. This is one of the proposals that was made when the bill was in the committee, but I agree with I share the sentiments of the previous speaker, my colleague. The goal of requiring the ARC review in the first place is to get review of the impacts that these projects, these developments are going to have on our aquifer, on our coastal, our historic, and our other resources. That's the goal of the ARC review. And it's correct that in the last term, it was changed from 60 to 30 days. But this bill would put a fine on them. And this bill would put a fine on them if they don't complete their review in 30 days. And this amendment would review any option that one of the agencies might have, such as Guam Waterworks, to request for an extension from the 30 days. And it's obvious the goal of the fine is to quicken the reviews, to, in some cases, rush these reviews, to make sure they're done so that we can speed up applicants and their developments. But it comes at a cost. It does come at a cost. I agree with the previous speaker that there is a risk in rushing reviews. This is what these agencies exist for. They exist to protect our aquifer. They exist to protect our historic sites. And just rushing them because we need to develop is not the answer either. It just puts more pressure on them to make errors, to not do a good quality review, to not do the review because they have other things on their plate. We have seen that. If we're paying any attention at all, we can see that these agencies are trying in very good faith to meet their mandates and that they need our assistance. I haven't found that they have been purposely delinquent. I've found some of them are working very hard, and it's almost the opposite. They're putting their input in, and their input is being ignored by the Land Use Commission. This is not a FOIA. A FOIA is releasing information that we have that should be made public. It should be relatively or comparatively much easier because we're not creating a document to respond to FOIA. And so I guess the penalty is, that the penalty is the same as, it is a little off because we're penalizing the same for producing a document as we are in this bill for an agency to use every resource available to it, its education, its training, all the additional training that they've done since they were hired, all these employees. I mean, like I said, these are the agency's mandates, and to do what it's mandated to do, and that's a thorough review. So I don't want in any way, and so this extension was added by the committee, and it's because of that. It's because I believe there are cases where agencies need additional time, and I want to give an example. So Guam Waterworks, after we submitted the committee report, sent in a letter relative to the bill, and it says, GWA can appreciate the bill's intention of compelling ARC members to respond in a timely manner to GLUC applications. However, we would like to offer our thoughts relative to the issues that may spur the bill. GWA has within its engineering division 2 sections, our new area development, permitting, and our planning sections that have staff members who are responsible for reviewing and assessing all applications submitted. Among the other engineering, construction, permitting, and planning responsibilities assigned to them. The involvement of these 2 sections allows for a comprehensive review of the various types of applications that are submitted to DLM. Although GWA has dedicated staff to prepare a position statement, there are issues that contribute to the timing and completion of application reviews that are outside of GWA's and presumably other ARC members' control. First, ARC members do not control the number of applications that come into DLM. Should the volume of GLUC applications increase and an agency's staff levels remain the same, then there's a likelihood of a position statement to be late. Second, final position statements may be pending the submission by the applicant of additional information that an agency requested. In many cases, the applicant's information is incomplete or insufficient to develop a thorough and well-informed position statement. Further, the additional information may impact the conditions of a position statement. Third, larger developments that may have the potential to impact resource or infrastructure will require more time to evaluate than smaller developments. Moreover, a large development may have complex intergovernmental agency coordination that slows the development of a position statement. They offered some mitigation ideas. One was provide legislative budget funding support to ARC members to ensure staffing levels are adequate for an agency to provide a position statement on time, or allow for separate fees to be charged for agency review. Request DLM to develop a checklist of required information for the developers. This I very much agree with, and I'm going to follow up with DLM why they don't have that already. And that if the applicant's information is not complete, then the time clock doesn't run. Allow for a longer extension period, particularly for large or complicated developments. They also put another issue back to us that says, one issue GWA would like to put on the table for reevaluation is the process of addressing land zoning issues through legislative action. The GLUC and the ARC committee are entities best suited to review and evaluate the changes to zoning and applicable land use requirements, thus working to keep the administration of such changes within the purview of DLM and the ARC is legislation that is worth pursuing. And I guess I had to laugh when I read that, because it is a little bit ironic that when we are doing land rezonings and mass rezoning from agriculture to industrial here in the legislature, you know, those things sometimes get cursory review. But so I oppose this amendment, Madam Speaker, because I understand, and I think these agencies all understand, and they are under a lot of pressure to get these reviews done. But I know for a fact that there are agencies that are in good faith working to get them done on time, but I think to not give them any avenue to request an extension for complicated matters, or because, for example, historic properties, we have deadlines from the federal government, the Department of Defense, that have nothing to do with local development, and they also have to answer to those. These are the same people answering in all their mandates. So I just think we have to be cognizant of that, and the language that is being proposed to be struck out, I think gives them at least, they have to justify why they're asking for an extension, and it has to be granted by the committee chair, I think, or the committee. So it's not a loosely, it's not loose that they're going to get a second extension. Situs Masi, Madam Chair.
Situs Maasi, Senator Chalahi, was that an objection to the amendment? Senator Taidagui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I greatly appreciate the explanation, especially for the good senator from PD. But I'm going to pull my amendment to the legislation, and I just want to mention, by the way, that this now makes it 75 days, you know, compared to what it is now at 30 days. So we are allowing it. So I'm going to pull my amendment from there. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Taidagui. There has been a motion to withdraw the amendment. Any objections? No objections? Motion carries. Is there anyone that would like to speak on the bill? Any other colleagues who would like to speak on Bill 7-35? Senator Taidagui, you are welcome to close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues who provided some information, good information. But what I'd like to say is that I brought this bill on because it was a request at the Department of Land Management, because the bill that was passed in the 34th Guam Legislature was passed with good intentions to move the economy through, but most especially it needed teeth. It needed teeth to it. And by adding this fine is the teeth that they're looking for. And I've met with the people down at the Department of Land Management. They feel that this is one way to put fire underneath their feet to get it done. Madam Speaker,
The ARC does not approve regulations. They don't do that. The process is very simple. Somebody comes in for a variance change, it goes to Department of Land Management. Land Management ensures that the documents are in order before presenting it to the ARC for their concerns and recommendations, only concerns and recommendations. Then those concerns from each department agency sitting on the ARC then is given back to the Department of Land Management. And then from there, they go to a public hearing in the municipality of the change, the zone change or the variance. And then from there, that information is then taken to the Guam Land Use Commission. So there is so many avenues of scrutiny for this. Madam Speaker, this bill simply puts feet to the fire to these directors to do a job that they were given to do and not hinder the possibility of economic growth on our island. So again, I thank my good colleagues for their input to this. And Madam Speaker, I ask that Bill 7-35 be moved to the voting file.
There has been a motion to move Bill 7-35 into the third reading file. Any objections? No objections, motion carries. Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, can I have 1 minute, Madam Speaker? There's
Yes,
a
absolutely.
process. I want to make sure I do
Sure.
it correctly before moving forward on
Absolutely.
Bill 20.
We'll take a quick 2-minute recess. We are back from recess. Senator Tydegui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues for indulging me in that couple minutes recess. Madam Speaker, I move to accept Bill 20-35 Core on general government operations, appropriation, and housing. As further, let me get it on this one. As further substituted on the floor.
Colleagues, you were given another bill that was labeled further substituted on the floor. There has been a motion to accept this bill 20-35, which is further substituted on the floor. Is there anyone that would like to? Senator Talahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the sponsor please just summarize what the changes are in the substitute version? It's not immediately obvious to me.
Senator Tydegui, please.
Thank you,
do
and
yield.
thank you, Madam Speaker, for that question. The bill that was submitted to Committee on Rules was actually not the right one, because the one that we submitted was did not have the SOPs requirement by GPD. And because GPD already did their SOPs, Madam Speaker, I placed on everyone's desk this morning 5 documents, and these documents were, one of the documents was the SOP created by the, not created, but updated by GPD, and the second one was the funding available through September 2020, and there was a time frame in which this money could be utilized, and the version that came out on Committee on Rules did not have this, and the intent was that if you did not use it by 2020, that you would lose this funding. And those are the 2 differences on the bill. The one that, okay.
Could we have a
Senator
30-second recess, Madam Speaker, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. We'll have a quick 2-minute recess. We are back from recess. Senator Tydegui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that opportunity to explain to my colleagues exactly what happened in the bill, and it was a substitute. So, Madam Speaker, I ask that we move Bill 20-35 to the third reading filed, so I can speak as further amended on the floor to the third reading and discussion, or we already did that?
Senator Tydegui, we first have to address adding the
sure.
bill as further amended on the floor.
Okay.
Okay, so Senator Tydegui is looking to substitute Bill 20-35 which is further amended, which is further substituted on the floor. Are there any objections? Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, colleagues, I'm in support of GPD and whatever they need to move forward to protect the people of Guam. The appropriation that she's referring to ends on September 2019. This is basically saying we're going to move 150 or 200,000 and carry over until next year. Continue to be available until no. When we start discussing the budget for next year, all funds available will be part of the packet. And supporting GPD for TVs, there's no doubt in my mind I'm going to support them. I know many of our colleagues are going to support them. But to carry over money, I couldn't support that. So if anything, I'd amend it to say 2019, September 30, 2019 on the substitute.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Are there any objections to move Bill number 20-35 and further substituted on the floor? There's an objection. Okay. There has been an objection. All those in... There has been an objection. All those... There has been an objection. There has been an objection. All those in favor of moving Bill number 20-35 and further substituted on the floor, please raise your hand. Yeah. To support Bill 20-35 into the second reading file. Oh, yeah. To accept version Bill number 20-35, which was passed out on your desk, which states it is further substituted on the floor. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion carries. Senator Titagui, you are recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I ask that we move Bill 20-35, let me get that, it's COR, as substituted by the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriations, Housing, and further amended on the floor to the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on it, please.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to present Bill 20 as substituted, which appropriates $200,000 from the Guam Retirement Security Plan fiscal year 2019 to the Guam Police Department for security cameras. Madam Speaker, as you remember, it was during the past month when this body overwhelmingly supported a separate bill using the same funding source in order to help the Guam Election Commission pay off debt from the 2018 election. I appreciate, Madam Speaker, the assistance of Director Bloss of the Retirement Fund for meeting with me prior to the introduction of Bill 20, making it clear that the funding source identified in this measure was never sought by the Government Retirement Fund, nor was her department aware of the methodology used to arrive at the appropriations amount contained in FY19 Budget Act. Madam Speaker, Bill 20 is an important public safety initiative that recognizes the value of security cameras in public areas, everywhere for that matter, as a force multiplier, particularly for the women and men of the Guam Police Department and other public safety entities who day in and day out do their best to protect our families despite the staff shortage and resource limitations. Madam Speaker, Bill 20 builds upon the initiative that the Guam Police Department and the Guam Visitors Bureau created for our tourist district, which currently involves 14 cameras throughout Tumon with support infrastructure installed and maintained by the Tumon Precinct. GPD further stated in its comment on Bill 20 that the equipment to monitor 14 sites through CCT camera costs approximately $80,000 and does not include the installation and monthly service charges for that. According to GPD, the $200,000 appropriation for Bill 20, together with the resources the agency is able to secure going forward, may help fund 9 additional sites under the Tumon-Tumuning Precincts Command, 6 initial sites under the Dedido Precinct Command, and 6 initial sites under the Hagatna Precinct Command. Madam Speaker, earlier this morning I passed out to my colleagues, as I mentioned earlier, 5 documents, and in those documents are the SOPs for GPD, the camera specs, emails from Lieutenant Ron Taituno, who oversees the procurement for these cameras, and the Department of Parks and Rec's letter, as well as a copy of the DOI grant for $175,000. So just to let you know that that's on the desk. Madam Speaker, during the public hearing on Bill 20, one of my colleagues asked a couple of questions regarding the feasibility study and the use of government funds for data plan service. Regarding the feasibility study, through GPD research and that of my office, we have found there is no doubt surveillance video footage is often undeniably evidence when used to prove guilt in a court of law. As to the second question, I was able to explain to the good senator who raised the issue of Government of Guam funds being used for data plans that the use of funds for internet service is permissible under law. However, funding for cell phone usage is restricted to certain situations. The cameras funded by Bill 20 will operate under internet services. It was also a concern of another colleague regarding the placement of signs to indicate this area is under video surveillance, and another colleague required regarding having regulations in place. These are all good questions, and it is why, Madam Speaker, I asked the Oversight Chair to hold off on reporting out Bill 20 until GPD completes its update of the agency's standard operating procedures, the SOPs, for the use of CCT cameras. I'm pleased to report that GPD has completed the SOPs update, and I've provided a copy of my colleagues today. The SOPs regulate the use of security cameras by GPD as such technology to complete its anti-crime strategy, to effectively locate and deploy personnel, and to enhance public safety and security in public areas. Madam Speaker, here are a few examples of the types of regulations covered in GPD's SOP. Precincts shall not use audio in conjunction with the security camera system unless appropriated court orders are obtained. Surveillance systems shall be used to observe locations that are in public view and where there is no reasonable expectations of privacy. Anyone who engages in the unauthorized use or misuse of security camera systems may be subject to criminal prosecution and/or administrative sanctions, including termination. Above all, Madam Speaker, on the issue of privacy, GPD SOP states the following, quote, past Supreme Court and lower court decisions indicate that this type of police monitoring is valid exercise of a government's authority. Under the current interpretations of the First and Fourth Amendments, CCT cameras represent a valid use of the state's power to protect its citizens. CCT cameras does not intrude upon one's individual sphere of which individuals do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy, unquote. In closing, Madam Speaker, I thank Chief Steve Ignacio and his team for working on these regulations that created an SOP. And more importantly, I thank them for recognizing how important security cameras are to
to work for protecting our families. Such families near the Jamaican Grill in Dedido Mall, where 2 men caught on surveillance cameras were arrested in January of this year for attempting to steal a woman's purse. Or near the Tumuning mobile gas station, where 2 men in December of 2018 were caught on surveillance camera, were arrested for aggravated assault. Or near the Crown Bakery in Barragata, where 3 men in July of 2018 were arrested on robbery charges after their getaway car was caught on camera. And the infamous ATM skimming, which occurred not once but twice, with the suspects caught on surveillance camera and eventually prosecuted. Or just last week, an armed robbery at the La Familia market was caught on camera. Madam Speaker, these are just a few examples of how critical security cameras are at apprehending and bringing criminals to justice. Madam Speaker, whether our families are directed or indirectly impacted by these crimes I stated above, our people support the use of security cameras in public areas. And I cite a survey of 361 readers by the Pacific Daily News on February 20, 2019, which asks, do you support the use of police security cameras in public areas? To which nearly 73% said they greatly support, 17% said they support, and just 10% said they didn't support the idea. Lastly, Madam Speaker, the funding identified may not be enough to cover all the areas identified by GPD during the public hearing on Bill 20. In fact, the Oversight Chair, in his comment during the public hearing, stated after asking if GPA looked into funding for the Office of Highway Safety and DPW. And the oversight stated this, quote, another reason why I was alluding to those two entities with that number, 200,000, will probably get you, if you're lucky with the hardware at the station, gosh, probably maybe only 2 stations of all the hardware on all the cameras, and maybe lucky if you're to get 10, lucky, unquote. The Oversight Chair is absolutely right. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, without funding for these cameras and monitors, other departments and agencies reaching out to GPD for assistance will also be limited when utilizing their prospective CTC camera system. This brings me to one agency that is currently working with GPD concerning CCT camera system. I've provided a copy of a letter from the Department of Parks and Recreation stating that although they have funding for CCT cameras in a few of their parks, which funding identifies only 10 parks out of 72, Madam Speaker. Like the Oversight Chair mentioned regarding the true cost, this amount may only cover realistically 5 parks, or even less. But after speaking with both GPD and Parks and Rec, they are working on an MOU between both agencies to assist with the monitoring as well as the ability to respond to criminal activity once detected. Madam Speaker, this collaboration is especially beneficial to Parks and Rec, but unless GPD has monitors and the ability to use this funding to set up their cameras and equipment, DPR will be even more limited to their ability to monitor parks with CCT cameras are located. Madam Speaker, during my campaign as senator, I asked individuals what their main concern is in our community. 98% of those people I've met said public safety was their primary concern. We are losing the battle. People are afraid to even walk out of the street in the daytime or send their children to school.
Today we have an opportunity to be proactive, Madam Speaker. Cameras in every aspect of the word are a deterrent to crime, and undeniably a tool used in court to land convictions. Whenever we are asked about our priorities as senators, the support for public safety is the first, not the second thing that comes out of our mouths. Today, we have the opportunity to put the people of Guam's hard-earned tax toward public safety. This is a force multiplier that will give our island community a reason to feel a little safer tonight and each day going forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity, and I look forward to any comments from my colleagues.
Thank you, Senator Tydegui. Is there anyone that would like to speak on the bill? Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I support the bill's intent, but I only have one amendment, and that's on page 2, to change on line 4, 2020 to 2019. The urgency is correct. The people of Guam need the assurance and safety. And if GPD is ready to do it, as soon as this bill passes, they should be able to do it within the fiscal year. My colleagues, I remind you, as we look forward to 2020 budget, we will be addressing many issues that GPD faces, to include maybe adding more TVs, more funding for that. But until we reach that point, I honestly believe that the funding should be only specifically to this fiscal year and not overlapping to another fiscal year.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. There has been an amendment proffered on page 2, line 4, where we are changing the year from 2020 to 2019. Are there any, Senator Tydegui, on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't stand in objection of the amendment. After doing the calculations and math, you know, they go through procurement process when obtaining anything in the government of Guam, and doing the math, they would have to start this right away and start the procurement process. So I think there's enough time to reach that goal, and it definitely, we talked about putting, you know, fire to our feet. This is an opportunity for GPD to act hastily. Thank you.
All right, colleagues, there has been an amendment. Anyone that would like to speak on the amendment? The amendment is on page 2, line 4. We are changing the year from 2020 to 2019. Are there any objections on the amendment? We'll take a quick 1-minute recess. We are back from recess. There was amendment proffered by Senator Sin Augustine on page 2, line 4, to change the year from 2020 to 2019. Anyone that'd like to speak on the amendments? Are there any objections? Amendment carries. On the main motion, Senator Marsh, you are recognized.
Sujuas Masi, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. This bill, as has been stated, it's to increase safety for us all. And as mentioned, we are often increasingly worried about such issues. We're seeing posted around different types of videotape about people being confronted at the beaches and other places. And so we know that there are incidents out there that a camera being able to capture that and being able to bring people to help resolve that issue are really important for our safety, but also for our tourist safety. Our tourism industry, it's one of the largest parts to our economy. It's really important that we're safeguarding it. We have heard of incidents, even just very recently, about tourists being mugged and so forth. We know that there seems to be an increase in their pedestrian traffic and other traffic as they're walking up the hill to Kmart, as they're walking around various streets. And so the increase in cameras to better safeguard them as they're doing that and adding to our economy, I think is really prudent and thoughtful on our part as legislators. They do have the standard operating procedure in place, that update in place, and so that means that protections are there for us while these cameras are operating, that they are protecting us, better protecting us by being able to have that surveillance, but they are also following procedures so that that does not go too far. It is being regulated. And I also think it's really important that our agencies are working together, and this is a prime opportunity to have the agencies with Department of Parks and Rec, over which I do have oversight, to make the parks around the island safer, for them to be able to have this relationship with the police department. And so I look forward to this year being a time where we're getting more cameras in place in Tumon and other areas that the police department have highlighted as areas of interest or concern. And also, this is going to be better allowing our parks to be safer, as the Department of Parks and Rec is also going to be able to get out there and get some security cameras to help perhaps stop some of that illegal dumping and other misuse of our parks, but to make them safer as well. And so for all those many reasons, including the fact that our community has spoken about concerns about public safety and the need for increasing that, I support this bill. Sujuas Masi.
Sujuas Masi, Senator Marsh. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the bill? Senator Munya, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this bill. I don't think that there's anyone on this floor that doesn't support GPD in their efforts for public safety, and I do believe that these security cameras will help aid the public in identifying really what is a true capture of a crime, because there are so many opportunities now with people with their cameras, which really does help GPD, and I do agree with that. But sometimes some of these videos go viral, so viral that we don't even know really if how true they are and when they were. So I think what this bill will do, if voted into law, will actually solidify our support for GPD and the use of cameras in aiding in capturing criminals that need to be caught. So I rise in support of this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sijus Maasi, Senator Munoz. Senator Marsh, you are recognized.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker. I motion that we recess until 2 p.m.
There's been a motion to recess until 2 p.m. We'll recess.